What's going on, everybody? This is TAETRO, and this is the Sensel Morph. Now, it may not look like much, but how about if I do this? Now it's something you can recognize. The Sensel Morph is a Bluetooth MIDI controller with multiple interchangeable surfaces. And if you saw me make a beat with this, you saw me using the music production overlay. This isn't the only overlay for this controller. There's a piano overlay, and did I mention that this thing is capable of MPE, multi-polyphonic expression, a level of expression that we relate to most of the Roly products like the C-board. And for Ableton users, just a pain to set up. But there's also a drum overlay, a video editing overlay, and this thing called the Innovators overlay, where you can basically design your own. This thing is super versatile. I love that it's Bluetooth. It's the exact same form factor as my 2015 iPad. No, seriously, like the exact same. It feels the same, a little bit lighter than the iPad, but in terms of the metal feel and the size, it's the same. And this thing has now rivaled my previous contender for most portable MIDI controller. When people ask me what is the most portable controller, I always have been recommending the C-board Block, which is still a great controller. I still love it. Also Bluetooth MIDI, that plays a huge role in it being portable, no wires required. But let's look at the footprint of these things. I'm not saying the Sensel Morph is like half the width of the C-board Block, but it's about half the width of the C-board Block. Now, of course, I was immediately drawn to this overlay, typical 16-pad drum pad setup, 2 touch strips, 8 knobs, and this little mini keyboard down here, along with some transport controls and control over your velocity or pitch bend at the top. Before we get too deep into the tutorial, I'm relying on my knowledge of music production, Ableton Live, controllerism, harmony and theory, a lot of topics that I've spent years learning. And if you're looking for a way to catch up to speed without going back to school and studying intensely, you should check out Skillshare, the sponsor for today's video. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators with over 25,000 courses in music production, business, design, and more. As we get a little deeper into the tutorial, I'm going to be talking some intermediate Ableton Live concepts like MIDI mapping and performance effects. And if these are things you're looking to know, you can definitely find a Skillshare course on these topics. When you join Skillshare, you're joining 7 million other creators using the platform. And today, you can try it for free for 2 months by using the link in my description. Give it a shot, try it for 2 months, and see how much you can learn in that period of time using the Skillshare classes. It's actually a really great opportunity to accelerate your learning in music production or even video production if you're trying to do similar videos to mine. So check the link in the description and sign up for your 2-month free trial of Skillshare today. But for now, let's get into the tutorial with the Sensel Morph. All right, so this session is a little different than my normal sessions because it only has 3 tracks: a drum rack, an instrument, and a loop. Now the drum rack is holding most of what makes up this beat. It's got my chords, got my drums, so I have kick, snare, open hat, big riser sound, my hi-hats. Then I have that like hold down a pad technique by using the arpeggiator. I have a full video on that. You can go find it up here somewhere. And then my vocal samples. That's what I've got there on the pads. For the loop, I just have this shaker loop. And on the controller, here's where I'll start to talk about how I mapped different effects to these knobs and sliders. These 2 touch strips here can be mapped to knobs, faders. I think one of them defaults to being a pitch bend. But here I've got it on a redux on my loop. And that gives me something to improvise with that's almost like a record scratch sound in the context of the track. And on the top touch strip, I have a low pass auto filter. That's on the master channel, so that affects the whole track. Then also on the master channel, I have a couple different effects racks that I like to use. One from Sample Magic and one containing a few different beat repeats that I like to put on my master channel. And those are mapped to these knobs. I'll go through them each. Let me just play the beat here. So we have low cut, high cut, the reverb breaker, and a beat stutter. The bottom four are these proper beat repeats. And there I have some cool effects that I can improvise with. It's fun to improvise with things that are not just musical ideas, especially if I'm working in the limitations of this controller where I have 16 pads and this little keyboard right here, which I'll talk about next. So it was really easy with the Sensel to actually just keep both of these tracks armed, the drum kit and the instrument, and set the instrument to only receive MIDI from channel 3, which means it won't get it from the drum rack. Otherwise, if it was receiving from all channels and I hit my kick, I would get a note on the instrument, and I don't want that. And since I am playing in a higher register on this keyboard instrument, it's not going to affect the drum rack because those are all existing down here at C1 and above. You might have heard a little bit of pitch bend there. And I think that's really cool about the Sensel. You can also do it on the pads. I turned that off for this session using this button here because while the drum pattern is going, if I'm playing this keyboard instrument as well and I pitch bend a note, it will also pitch bend all the other notes that are playing, including the ones in the drum rack, because that track is still armed. Almost has like a tape effect, but that's not really what I'm going for, so I just kept the pitch bend off for this. To make this session a little bit easier to run, I mapped play and stop to these two buttons here, as well as my session record button at the top to the record button here. I did have to do a little bit of tweaking in the Sensel app from the Sensel website. I needed to switch them to be toggle, which means you press it once and it turns on, you press it again and it turns off. And I needed to switch them obviously from just the normal play button transport controls to the MIDI CC buttons, because usually what happens is these controllers have these default mappings and that they don't always map to your specific DAW because they're trying to adhere to a lot of different DAW standards. And you would think with transport controls, oh, play, stop, and record, a company will just say, well, we'll just map that to the transport controls up here in Ableton. But the arrangement record button is not really useful to me in a performance, so I usually always have to go and remap the record function of whatever controller I'm using to the session record, because that's where I'm working most of the time. And that's how the controller functions in this section, but I want to talk a little bit about how the actual session functions. How do I get the recording going and how do I loop? I start with 2 empty clips that are 4 bars each. Now to start the session, I'll have the audio loop play, which it's already activated to play. I just need to play the session to hear it. Now that's rolling, and I'm counting the time in my head. 2, 3, 4. So if the loops are playing, but then I activate session record, both of those armed tracks are going to be able to have notes recorded into them. I'll bring this down to 1 bar to just demonstrate this. Now this works really well when you're working with drum rack. It's almost like MPC or Machinist style because it's constantly recording. So when you finish one 4-bar pattern, you can jump into the next set of sounds. So I go from playing chords and vocal samples right to my kick and snare, and everything that I'm playing is getting recorded as I go. So let me demonstrate that really quick. kick and snare. Hi-hat. You can hear I left the pitch bend on there, but it's cool because you just keep layering things on. The recording stays active. So this is just an example of how I think beat makers could really take advantage of the music production template and the Sensel Morph. I think it's a super easy to travel with controller. I mean, this thing is way smaller than an MPC. It's way smaller than a push, an MPK. And though it is limited, you still can get a lot out of this controller as I just demonstrated. This isn't the only way to use it. If I combined this with some other overlays, I could get a lot more out of it too. Alright, let me know what you thought of the Sensel Morph down in a comment and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. If you have any questions about the Sensel Morph that you think I could answer, feel free to ask those as well, and if there's enough, I could do a follow-up video or at least try some of the different overlays. Don't forget to subscribe for more live electronic music performances, tutorials, and content to make you a more productive producer. Oh yeah, and my podcast, TAETRO Radio, where I review music from the TAETRO community, it's back. You should check the link for that in the description as well. And if you're interested in submitting your music, I put all the info down in the description. Check it out. But for now, this has been TAETRO. Have a good one.